Well, good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me? I'm Michael Lehman, as you see, from Hearing Life Company. We're about 700 stores strong across the United States. So we're not a small local business, but we kind of feel that way, I think, when people come in. And Hearing Life's been around quite some time. We work with a brand called Oticon hearing aid out of Denmark. It's some of the best hearing aids that you can get anywhere. Very, very high tech, artificial intelligence and all those things that you hear, AI, you hear all about that. Our hearing aids are working with you and sort of listening and taking care of the environment around you, which is really nice. But today the topic that we're here to talk about is isolation, loneliness, and hearing loss and how they tie together. And how the hearing loss actually can result in you pulling back, not attending as many events, or even just shaking your head and saying yes. And they were saying, would you like cheese on your spaghetti, or would you like this? And you say yes. So those are the things that begin to happen when we lose our hearing, unfortunately. The first thing here, obviously, being able to hear connects us in so many ways, because we're not even necessarily in the presence of each other as much anymore. Sometimes we're on the phone, we're doing video, talking with people, and it's harder to hear there than it is in person. So we're spending more time apart, and that can make it harder to engage with people in general. So a couple of just general facts. There's about 340 million Americans, and at least 48 million have some degree of hearing loss. So it's a very widespread problem, even in the U.S. here. If you're over 65 in the group, between 65 and 75, at least one of the three of you in the group has some sort of hearing loss. Now imagine being in here, we probably have more hearing loss than an average group because of our topic. But once you reach 75, it's 2 out of 3 people that have some form of hearing loss. So we're all starting to, the eyes and everything start to go. The older you get, the more likely you are going to have some issue with hearing. And unfortunately, when we go to our physicals or see our primary care doctors, only 16% of them admit to doing any hearing screening at all. In fact, you go do all the typical things, the blood work, and they look in your eyes and ears. They say, well, your ears look okay, but they don't do anything to test it. They will have you stand in the hallway and read some letters. So they're doing something for your vision, but they're not testing for hearing. So we don't really know what level of loss we might have, even if we feel like we probably have some hearing loss. This is a big problem, though, because once we notice that we're having trouble, or someone else notices, we tend to delay getting treatment for it, because we say, well, I'm missing a few words here and there, but I still kind of understand what's going on. And then a few years later, we start missing more and more, and then we eventually isolate, and we didn't treat our problem. We didn't even go find out how severe it could be. So that's an issue. We're all a little stubborn, and as we age, we say, well, it's part of it, or I don't feel like I need it right now. So that's that issue. Now, what causes hearing loss? There are actually 3 types of hearing loss. If you see over here on this side here, it says conductive. And conductive is anything that can get between the outer ear and the middle ear, or inside of the middle ear, which this may be hard to see. But this is an ear here, and we see the ear canal. This little white deal here is your we call it tympanic membrane, but you'd know it as an eardrum. And this little blue organ here, which is actually blown up for this diagram, this is where all the hearing occurs, but it has to get through the middle ear, where the little bones and where the fluid gets inside of your ear when you get sick. If any of those things are blocking sound from getting in there, whoops, let me go back here, then you could have a conductive hearing loss. That jumped a lot, didn't it? There we go. So if you've had a ruptured eardrum, and you've got a hole in your ear, or it's burst from fluid or something like that, or you've even had tubes put in your ears at some point, then that can cause the sound not to make it through into the blue organ there, the cochlea, which is where we process the sound. So anything in there, fluid, wax is a big problem too. Now you can get wax out and potentially hear better, but if you have hearing loss, it's only a part of the problem. So anything there in the middle of the ear or outside can cause you not to have the sound get through, okay? And then anything over here is sensorial. It's a big word. It means that there's some damage inside of the hearing organ, the cochlea. There are little hair cells inside of your ear that stand up like this when they're healthy. And if they get blasted with sound or chemical or an accident could occur, then those hair cells can fall over and the sound goes right over the top and we don't hear them. And that's what's happening. Once that happens inside of the ear, we call it sensorial. And how that occurs, just by aging alone, just like your knees give out and the eyes start to get weak, that organ can start to not hear very well. Those cells can die just as a result of age. It's called presbycusis, that type of hearing loss. Ototoxicity here, this could be from just having a chemotherapy or some strong treatments or regular prescriptions that you take on a regular basis. Could begin to work on your hearing a little bit against it depending on what it is. We call that ototoxicity. Obviously loud noises, explosions, things like that, we know that causes hearing loss. One thing that's kind of scary, tumors. We can develop tumors on our auditory nerves, which would hamper the ability for the signals to get to the brain. So looking at that, these are the things that occur on the inside of the ear. And then there are some here that cross over and can cause issues from both sides, whether it's genetic, again, you have an accident, or you have some sort of infection in there. It could cause problems in the middle and the interior of the ear. So those are the different types of ways that we can develop hearing loss. Hearing loss, what happens? When we're not picking up the sounds properly, and when people speak, it's just sounds. And those sounds, we interpret as letters and words. And if we're not hearing well, we're not interpreting that speech very well, we call it compromised speech perception, okay? This means I hear, but I don't understand what you're saying. I hear the words coming in just fine, okay? But did you say cat or did you say rainbow? Whew, we got trouble there, right? So it becomes more effort for you to communicate with people, and this is where the topic that we're here for comes in. We tend to disengage from events. People call us and say, hey, do you want to come attend this? It's a wedding, it's a dinner, it's whatever. And you say, I have something planned that night. And unfortunately, it's just because you don't want to go and be there and be embarrassed or waste your time, even if that's where your hearing is. You feel like you might be wasting time. So this is where we start worrying about the topic at hand, is not getting some help when we're not hearing and just sitting things out. So I know that there was someone here at St. Clair in the last month or so that talked about the brain cognition and the hearing and how they work together. But in case you weren't here, I'm going to kind of go over that a little bit more. Let's go here. Okay. So what you're looking at over here, this is a hearing test, okay? And it shows loss going down this way. It's saying to you that, the lower the signal coming in, which means here you can't hear that, the higher the cognitive load, okay? Meaning we've got a lot of inputs coming into our brain. They're confusing us because we don't necessarily understand those sounds. And it can wear you out, okay? It's listening fatigue. Whether a hearing aid is in and it's new to you and it's kind of strong and it's bothering you, that could be listening fatigue. Or whether it's straining all the time and burning a lot of energy in our brains to hear what's being said and understand it. And that can be one of the reasons that we also isolate. It's just it wears me out to go out to restaurants and these places. So this one you can't see very well on here, excuse me. This is actually shows the structure of the brain where it actually can begin to atrophy if we're not getting the signals in there, because your brain's very efficient for using the energy it has. If it's throwing energy at something that's not functioning, it'll back off and put it somewhere else where it can be better used, and then we have further decline. So it's sort of a snowball situation there. Changes in our behavior, social disengagement, which is what we were just talking about. Other health problems, being isolated could lead to a little depression. Accelerated cognitive decline. If you have a hearing loss like this one on the left, you are 5 times more likely to develop early onset dementia than people your age that don't have that hearing loss. So that's why it's so important to treat it, and why it's dangerous that people wait 7 to 10 years on average to even look into their problem. So COVID-19 lockdown gave us a perfect chance to study isolation. A lot of people were forced into isolation, so they had a good time period there where they could get some data on that. So unfortunately, you wouldn't think this, but the studies that were done showed that isolation and loneliness actually led to an increased risk of death from all causes. Kind of strange, but that's what they say. 15 cigarettes a day. What, isolation? Really? 15 cigarettes. Well, it may not be hitting your lungs, but it's hitting your body. It's impacting your body. Withdrawal, not having that interaction is pretty dangerous for us as human beings. We need to be, we're a social species, In fact, in London, these findings actually led to the appointment of a loneliness minister. That's how impactful that they found isolation to be, is that they needed to do that. This was 2018 actually, and so they had this whole COVID time period, a couple of years, 2 or 3 years there, where people of age especially, even when COVID sort of cleared up a little bit, still remained isolated out of fears of that, so that exacerbates the problem. So this shows you it's a pretty big deal to appoint a minister just based on loneliness and isolation. Okay, well, we haven't talked about hearing aids yet, but how can they help you? So obviously what a hearing aid is doing, people say, why don't I go to Walmart and just buy one of those on aisle 3? Okay, it's not very expensive. I'll just put those in and they'll work, right? Well, all those are doing are amplifying everything in the room to the same degree, okay? And if you have a hearing loss, you probably don't have hearing loss straight across the board where you just need to lift everything. And I'm talking about frequencies that we hear, which is low pitch and high pitch. Those need to be accounted for based on your hearing loss and not just any random object you could put in that amplifies things. Because if you wear a hearing aid, you know that louder is not necessarily better, okay? People can scream and yell, and you say, you can yell all you want, but I don't understand the way you speak, all right? And that comes from correcting the little frequency problems that you have and telling your hearing aid to fix it for you. The ones you buy in Walmart or wherever else, they're just going to make it noisier, okay? So that's the difference in an amplifier and a hearing aid. All right, so obviously if we restore those sounds to your brain and you understand that I said it's Thursday and not that I'm thirsty, okay, then we're in a conversation, right? So obviously you're more confident in your social situations when you're understanding, participating more, not avoiding going to a restaurant because those places can be hard. All these things are pretty obvious. Less stressed, understanding the television, not vibrating the windows in the house for everybody else or your neighbors, right? Using the telephone more easily, getting back, talking to old friends again, where we may have given up, using the phone because we really struggle and it's embarrassing. So yeah. Pretty obvious stuff. Getting connected with people and feeling included. That's what we want as human beings. So what do you do about it if you're concerned? If you say, yeah, I either know I have a hearing loss, I wear a hearing aid, or I kind of feel like I struggle, what do I need to do? Well, the next step, we say test your ears at 60 years, okay? I would say move it back a little bit. Nowadays we're doing a lot more earbud wearing. Kids listen to this loud music in cars. I would say do it at 40 when you do your colonoscopy, right? Okay. Don't do them on the same day probably. But I would back that up and start doing it early. I see a lot of people, I'm 48 years old, I see a lot of people my age coming in with trouble, and younger, okay, for various reasons. I say 40 years. All right, so here's a quick screening for yourself. Do you basically accuse everybody else of being mumblers? Okay, does everybody mumble? Does nobody speak up? Is it their fault? Tends to be that when that's the problem, I don't think everybody developed mumbling issues all at once. I think we probably had some hearing loss that's developed over time and we're starting to notice it. Again, we talked about the fact that you may be a little bit tired, that listening fatigue after a long day. Let's say you go to a wedding and there was a lot of noise, that can be really exhausting. If you feel that way, could be hearing related. Missing keywords, I miss keywords sometimes, everybody does, but are you missing them to the point that you can't follow the conversation? All right, is that an issue? Let's see here. Background noise bothers everybody. Hearing loss, hearing fine. Noise makes it harder. So people come in with hearing aids, they say, I have a little trouble with the background noise. I said, well, so do I. So we're going to work on that a little bit. We can tweak those things, but that is part of, we can't have everybody in the restaurant be quiet, right, so that we can hear. So we've got to adapt our ears for that. Turning up the TV and radio, we know that. Do you miss the doorbell ringing? Has anybody said they came and knocked or rang and you didn't hear it? That's a volume problem in your ear, okay? That's not an understanding issue. All these things are pretty obvious though. If you start to have these issues, you got some hearing loss most likely. Now one thing I haven't brought up yet is the ringing or waves or sounds in your ears that there's nothing going on but you hear it, right? You hear a ringing or crickets or something like that in your ears. 90% of people that hear that sound have a hearing loss. Okay, so only 10% of people that actually hear that sound have normal hearing. So it's a pretty good indicator if you're hearing ringing, crickets, washing sounds in your ear, swooshing sounds, that you have some hearing loss. Okay, those are indicators. Okay, now again, why don't I go to Walmart, pop some amplifiers in there and see if I do better? Well, you can do that. They have a 30-day return policy, okay? Put them in, go out and see if they work. If they don't work, then you call somebody like me, find a professional. And the reason it's important is because we're doing a lot of things behind the scenes in the testing. You know, comprehensive testing is not done when you go to the store and you put something in your ear. The hearing aid or the amplifier you put in your ear is not going to be adjusted for you personally. And you know, you really need someone that knows how to tweak those things that you don't like and the things that you don't understand to get it back to where you can understand and re-engage. So I go through, let's see, every year I do continued education. I had 3 exams. I had to show someone in person, proctored exams, that I can do this. We have to do annual compliance. We have to have all of our equipment calibrated annually. So now you see what's the difference. Okay, we wouldn't go through that. That wouldn't be required by the state if that stuff wasn't deemed important. So that's why you come to professionals, is because that little razor's difference between what we can do and what you may do with something else could help you re-engage and hear and understand again, okay? And as you progress, with hearing loss, it tends to drop a little bit, and so when I see someone's lost a little bit year over year, I'm not too concerned. We just tell the hearing aid we need to fix that new deficiency, okay? So you're constantly keeping up with that. It's not just come in once, get a product and leave. You know, you'll be back when you need to. It's like a race car, okay? They take a lot of fine tuning to get them to work right. But after you get a hearing aid in and we get it sounding good, as long as your hearing's not dropping, we just monitor that and take care of you indefinitely, okay? Yeah, so this is where I was going to do Q&A. We got started early, that's fine. Does anybody else have any thoughts or questions? His question was, are they legitimate, the hearing aids that are that you find on the internet that say, or the TV ads that say they are hearing aids and not amplifiers, what they may be, a lot of them have a few bands, okay? Like in your car you have a bass, a mid, and maybe a treble switch to adjust the sound in your car. A lot of those are just going to have kind of broad adjustments where you can raise and lower what you feel is too much or little, but it's really not addressing that particular shape of your hearing loss, okay? The hearing aid's going to go in and divide that thing up 24 or 48 times instead of 3 times, okay? The other thing is, how are you going to test your hearing loss when you order something from the internet? Well, how would you find out what type of hearing loss you have, how severe it is, and am I doing more damage putting this thing in there? Okay, so you really need someone that's professional, like in the previous slides, that know what they're looking at, that know what type of loss you have, that's going to test it with you over and over again until we get it comfortable. And then even then, the more modern hearing aid, the more we'd call, I don't want to call it a real hearing aid because all of them can aid your hearing. But the higher end hearing aids do a lot more than just fix those frequencies. They can mask the music. They can mask the ringing. They can take that stuff out. For a lot of people, it goes away completely. I have several patients that don't have much hearing loss, but they wear them because the ringing drives them crazy all day. And with the hearing aid in, it takes care of that. Now, when you take it out at bedtime, if that's when it gets worse, you're going to need to get to sleep quick, okay? Because when you take them out and put them on your charger, which is the way we do it, that ringing's going to start coming back because it's quiet again. So they help when they're in, okay? You don't understand well when they're out or if they're dirty, and the ringing may come back if they're out. But I don't know if that answers any of your questions about the difference. You get a professional, you get somebody who knows what they're doing, as opposed to DIY. We always want a family member or close neighbor, friend, somebody to come if possible. Just to explain, first of all, the hearing loss is not his fault. He's not ignoring you, okay? A hearing aid doesn't make him Superman. It aids. The reason it's called a hearing aid and not a hearing fixer is because it aids your ability to do the best you can in the environment presenting noises, okay? And I do tell, look, relative, daughter, if you're gonna say something to mom or want her attention after 20 minutes out of the room, you know, don't come in and say, hey mom, what do you want to drink for supper? She'll go, what? And you could have said, hey mom, yes. What would you like to drink with supper?
Get their attention.
I'll have tea, okay? You see how much easier it is than doing it twice or 3 times? So yes, I always tell the third party with them, look at their face, get their attention, say their name. Okay, and then the next thing is, and this doesn't mean we're talking and I say your name, and then I say your name, and it means if we're not talking, get their attention first, and don't assume that everybody's going to hear, that they're going to hear everything all the time. Anybody else? Nope. All right. Well, thanks for coming in. I know you got a lot of options and things you can do with your time, so appreciate you coming. If you want to grab a card on the way out, I don't take names and numbers or anything, but if you're interested, just call and say, I saw you at St. Clair's, and I just want to make an appointment. And we're open 5 days a week. Real easy to do. It's all on you to get there. Okay? All right. Thank you.